Welcome to the Traveling Troubadour, the podcast that follows the lives of musicians who've successfully toured around the world playing the music everyone knows and loves. I'm your host, Jason Perno, and our next guest comes from Bulgaria. His name is Petko Slavov. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Petko, welcome to the show. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and how you first got into music?
Hello, Jason. Thanks for inviting me. Well, you said it right. My name is Petko Slavov. You actually pronounce it quite well. I'm from Bulgaria. I grew up in a small city called Kazanlak. It's right in the middle of the country, and it's also called the Valley of the Roses, because we have a lot of roses right there. And, I actually grew up next to the factory that makes guitars.
What guitars?
That's called Cremona. I think they took it from the Italian. But, we grew up around there. We were like maybe 200 meters from the factory. So me and my brother, we used to go in the yard of that factory and, looking at all this wood they made the guitars from. That was really fascinating. And we just wanted to become musicians. We just wanted to get out of this city because it was too small for us. So I guess the music was the only way to get out and start traveling.
You had big dreams at that age.
Yes.
Yeah.
We just wanted to travel. We just wanted to travel with music, with making music.
I find that's a very common theme amongst most of the troubadours is this sense of adventure and wanting to get out and see the world and travel.
Exactly.
So who were your influences back then? What kind of music were you listening to? Was it local Bulgarian style rock or? Yes.
Well, I grew up in Bulgaria was still under the communism. So I guess the West music was not so much into the radio back then. So we were listening to a lot of Bulgarian rock bands. And, the Beatles was the one of the West bands that they would let into the radio. So Beatles and I guess, the first song I've ever sort of get into my head, it was Hotel California. When I just think
Eagles.
About it. Eagles, that was the song, and also a English band called Smokey. I don't, if you remember that.
Yeah, they'd sing "Living Next Door to Alice," right?
Yes, that's the one. So I remember listening to this LP that my parents had with the Hotel California, and I would think, if I could just make this solo, if I could play that solo, that's my dream. That's what I want to do.
So how old were you back then?
Well, I think I was in the fourth, fifth grade. So that was 11,
so
11
quite young.
years. Yeah, quite young. So my father had this old guitar, but he would not allow us to touch it. But of course, when he was out working, me and my brother would sit and try to play that difficult A minor chord. But once I get the A minor and E minor, we start playing our originals. That's what I remember. I just start thinking about melodies and stuff, because I've realized I could never play that solo of Hotel California. It was too complicated for me.
Well, have you ever learned it? Did you finally get it down?
I get it like 3 years ago because I had to.
That's great.
But still difficult.
Better late than never. I never learned it, but... All right, so who were your main influences, though? Were it the Western bands or mainly Bulgarian bands, or a little bit of both?
Little bit of both, I would say. We had and we still have this band called sort of the Crickets. That would be the translation. They were really big back then, and now they're still going. And of course, as I've mentioned, all this compilation in the LPs we had, because we were not, as I said, familiar with the Western music so much as comes to albums. If I know Beatles, that would be the compilation of some songs, but I would never know the albums. I would listen to Rolling Stones, but I only knew the Angie song because it was in a certain compilation
Angie,
that they allowed us.
yeah.
Yeah. So that was actually that's the other song that I've sort of, when I was growing up and started playing these chords, the Angie was the song I was trying to do.
It's so interesting hearing this perspective because obviously I grew up in the West and we didn't have any of these restrictions, and this is sort of stuff that you hear about in movies. It's not something that I've ever actually come across in real life, and so I'm really fascinated by the fact that you grew up in this part of the world that your music that was very much controlled and censored by a communist regime. Back
then, everything started changing in around 1989 in Bulgaria.
Yeah.
And I've already been 19 years old, and I was, 2 years later, I would start travel to Norway.
How did you get into Norway?
Well, that's the thing. The musicians in our city, we had a lot of bands. Well, the good thing about the communism back then was that in every restaurant, you would have a band, at least 5, 6 pieces band. And in our small city, we had like 6, 7 restaurants. So that would make 30 musicians playing every night. So we would go, every night in a different restaurant just to listen to them start because there was no YouTube. We didn't have any books to learn the instrument
there was no competition.
No.
People wanted live music, yeah.
Yeah, but I would just go and sit and watch these musicians playing the covers they would play. And so we said to ourselves, once we get, start playing. And the big thing in Bulgaria was the only way to get out was to go and play in Scandinavia. That was another thing.
Really? That was a well-known thing.
That was the well-known. Even our famous bands, like I've mentioned, they used to travel to Scandinavia because they would make money. They would make real money, or we would say real money. And you can buy a real instrument. That was actually the goal for us.
Really?
Yes.
It's funny that you mention that because now when I think about it, when I played on the cruise ships, very often they would have bands from Bulgaria playing as the house band. And I know that there's a monetary reason for that because they would pay the Swedish musicians or the Norwegian musicians and so on
with an amount.
They would get paid their local currency, what they would expect to get paid, but to save money, they would outsource and hire bands from countries like Bulgaria that would be there. But for you guys, was that good money as well? I mean, even though you were getting paid less than...
Yes, for us it was like, I could not calculate right now, but it was maybe 8 times more, maybe even more than you can make here. So you see the difference. So those were the driving forces as to go and start travel and make money and get real instruments, come back and start recording your originals. That was in the beginning.
So that was the ultimate goal. It was
yes.
That's incredible. So you are motivated primarily about going out, seeing the world, and then making enough money to get a real instrument so that you can go back to your home country and then do original music.
Yes, that's exactly what we wanted.
So what I've heard from a couple of the musicians that I work with, that back home in Bulgaria, you're actually a big deal. Is that true? Are you a well-known artist in Bulgaria?
Well, I would love to say that, but I'm not. The thing is that I was playing in a host band on national TV. It's a show that on the national TV that I was in a band, but well, not really. I'm still making my own music, and some of my own music it's on the radio, on a national radio, but that would not make me a known person. Well, people know me, but I'm not like a pop star or something. But yeah, I've got some songs on the radio.
Yeah, the national radio, yeah.
Oh, the national radio, yes.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the big news for me, it was last year, I got my novel, my book published.
You got your novel published?
Yes. And that's I'm really, really sort of proud of.
So what is that about?
Well, that's about a Bulgarian girl living in Norway. She's an immigrant, and she lives with a guy, and she makes a attempt for suicide 2 times.
Oh, quite serious. Is it based on any truth, or is it fiction?
Yes, it's the girl that I sort of met before. It was based on her, but of course the story is fiction. It's made up.
Is it available on Amazon?
Not now. It's only been published here but I'm talking with someone to get audio in audiobooks and also get in Amazon. And of course I need a translator for English or Norwegian. But I'm thinking about it. It's been 4 months now since it's been published. For me, actually, this is something that really...
Like a lifetime accomplishment.
Yeah, yes.
So you eventually ended up in Norway.
Yes.
And were you working on a cruise ship there, or you were working on...
In the beginning, we only would play on land. Because back then, that's like 28 years ago, in every city in Norway, they would have a live band in a restaurant as well. So there were so many bands before, and you would play every day, not like now on the weekends, but you will be playing every day. So
6-7 days a week.
Yes.
Yeah.
And well, we came with we came from Bulgaria to Norway with Lada, this vehicle, this Russian vehicle called a Lada. They would have Moskvich Lada, so we were quite interesting. So we were traveling 3,000 kilometers with that, and so in the beginning only we would play every month in one city, and then next month we would go to another one. And the contracts would be from 6 months to 9 months. And you would play every day, and you change cities every month. So that's how it was back then, not anymore.
And this was through an agency, or?
Yes, that was through an agency.
Now you and I,
agency.
We actually met in Copenhagen, in Denmark.
Remember? Yes.
Living in the musician's flat together. Actually, yeah, I do remember how you introduced yourself to me. And I'm not going to go into that in the podcast. But
sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that was funny. It just means that all my friends knew me, and they knew it was safe to make jokes like that. Yeah. But how did you end up in Copenhagen?
Well, I was our band just we disbanded, and at some point. We were actually the best of friends. We were 4 guys, me and my brother, and 2 other guys from the schoolmates. So we were quite close, and so we were playing for 10 years like that. But in the end, 3 of them got married in Scandinavia. So it was only me coming back to Bulgaria, and after 1 year, I was sort of looking for a job.
Let me ask you a quick question before you go into it, because you had mentioned they all gotten married to Danish or Scandinavian women. How did that work out in the end?
Well,
are they still married?
No. The 3 of them, they're divorced. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, that's such a common story. As a matter of fact, when I first came to Denmark, there was a joke that the musicians used to make that don't ever marry a Danish girl.
Yeah.
Because they all said that they would, be really into you in the beginning, but then one day they might just, with a drop of a hat, just say, I'm no longer interested. And divorce is so much easier in Scandinavia. So it was...
yes. Well, at least you've been warned.
Yeah.
I don't think they were but but anyway, actually, our guitar player only got married with a Danish. The other two was with Norwegian.
With Norwegian.
But that guy, they were together for 20 years, and they all of a sudden, it was really a surprise for me. They were really good couple. But anyway.
You find that there's also cultural differences when you marry somebody. I myself am married to a Danish woman.
Yes.
So
yes.
Luckily it works out really well for us. Our personalities are quite compatible. But I've seen in many instances it doesn't always work out so great with the cultural differences. But
that's what I talk about in a book, actually.
Really?
Yes. That's a lot about this stuff. But okay, let's.
I think I hear a murder going on in the background somewhere.
Well, that's the ambulance.
It's the ambulance. Okay,
that's the ambulance.
All right, so that's how you ended up in Scandinavia. Where else have you played? If anywhere else in the world?
But I've been to Poland. I've been playing in Poland. In Poland, yeah.
Now that's an interesting place. What do you think of Poland?
Poland's great. I loved it. I was in Warsaw, and then in Poznan. So we would play in a Sheraton suite and hotel there, and it was great.
Now, was that something that you booked on your own, or is this through an agent as well?
It was through a woman. She was a director, Bulgarian director of the Sheraton in Warsaw, and she saw us here playing in one of the clubs in Sofia, and they had this pub with live music. I don't know if they still do, but there was every day. It was playing every day.
Wow.
In that club. So it was great. We would stay in Sheraton. Perfect. It was good.
That's always a good way to find new work, is by people who will come in and hear you play and say, "Hey, yes. I got a bar over here, or a venue over there, and can you come play over there?" And that's how it starts. Sometimes it's not always through an agent. Sometimes it's just through meeting people.
No,
and
that would be actually. That would be actually the best way, because people would see you.
Yeah.
The way you perform. And if they like that, they will book you. And
I have to say that most of the time, especially when I played in countries like Switzerland, and you're having a really great night and the bar is completely packed and everybody is, rooting for you. And then somebody comes up and says, "Man, you're awesome. And I want you to play in my place." I've had people from Russia and different countries coming up to me saying, "Man, you got to come to France. You got to go." One guy even said, "I want to fly you out to the Philippines in September." And I got to say, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, it never works out. It's just drunk people who are.
That would be my question, actually. How much of this?
I'd say maybe 5% of the time it actually turns into a gig, but the other 95% it's just drunk people talking. So,
how many telephone numbers you have written down on a piece of paper? Call me and got that.
Yeah, alcohol. It's a funny thing. People get really excited when they're drunk, but they sober up the next day. You're lucky. Like, that's why I actually started writing down on the paper, not only my name, but where I'm from and where you met me. Because I knew, like, the next day they look at this piece of paper and they go, "Who the hell is this guy?"
That's funny you mentioned this.
Yeah, I'm sure it's happened to you before. What do you most enjoy about the Troubadour lifestyle?
I would
being
say
on the road and everything. Yeah.
I think it's just contagious. Once you start traveling, there's something about it. First, just the traveling part. And then, I don't know, it's, of course, meeting people.
Yeah.
That's one thing. It's meeting different people, talking with them, exchanging ideas, thoughts.
Yeah, you get out of your bubble.
Of life. Yes, exactly. So that's one thing.
And then you get to challenge your own thoughts, your own views of what you think life is about. And
yes. you become observer. You observe life from a different perspective. You see people, and even when you play, maybe you do the same. When you play and you look at people and you think about them, you think what their life might be.
I'm always imagining them naked, so that's why I always have a smile on my face.
That's one thing.
But I mean, seriously though, I call it being a world citizen. You become a citizen of the world.
Exactly.
The more you travel and the more you get around, especially if you start mixing East and West.
Yeah. You should know much better than me, though, because you came from another continent, and for you it must be the changes.
Yeah, especially when I was in China, that was a mind blower. You know, I was also in Russia for 8 days, but that was just for like a visit, and that also blew me away. I stuck out like a sore thumb. People could see me coming from a mile away. It was like foreigner on my head. As a matter of fact, I was traveling with a friend, and she was Russian, and we go into this museum, and she bought the tickets for me because you could see written in Russian that there was one price, and then in English there was another price. It was a completely different price. So they charge you differently according to if you're a foreigner or not. And so we get in, and we hand in our tickets, and the woman just looks at me and she says, "Where's he from?" And then my friend says, "He's from here. He's Russian." And then she says, "No, he has to get another ticket." And then she just wrote "foreigner" in Russian right on the ticket, and I had to go back out. And that's just the way it is. It was so obvious. I don't know. Maybe it was because I was walking around with a smile on my face all the time, because everyone in Russia seemed so serious.
You should not smile. You should not smile in Russia.
Yeah. Apparently they say that. Yeah, it's reserved only for your friends. Otherwise, you're very serious all the time, always looking, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
But what about? Is there anything that you found being a troubadour and traveling that you didn't like? Or any drawbacks?
I guess loneliness. Loneliness is the part that I did not like, of course. And you got, being melancholy and nostalgia. You got all this, and you have to just sort of fight with them or get used to it. Because I've seen people like tough men going to travel, and after the first month they will be broken because they're lonely, because they're so dependable of home, wives, just their normal lives, and you can see them just really smashed down because of that. And it's tough. I don't know if people realize that, but it's really tough being on the road.
I'm glad that you said that, because in my book I had mentioned a couple of things that are drawbacks, and loneliness is one of the things that I had mentioned, and it personally didn't affect me. I liked being on the road, but you're not the first musician to tell me that it's tough being alone. For some musicians, it's really, really hard to do that. And it's not just being away from your family or your wife. I mean, there are a lot of musicians that aren't married, but you go out on the road and you're there for like 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks on some of these gigs, and then you're out going somewhere else. And even if you make friends, these aren't permanent relationships. These are temporary friendships and maybe you see them again, maybe a year later, if you're lucky. Because if you're working on a cruise ship, it might be different cruise staff the next time. And then maybe you'll see somebody you saw last time, maybe you won't. But there's no stability. That's the thing.
Exactly. And of course, me and you, we've seen people destroying themselves because of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it is tough. So I guess that's the toughest part. And so just by saying that, also you have to go at night and entertain and look your best, even when in your mind you're not. That's the other thing. That's part of the job. That's one thing. When you mentioned, you asked me why did I start by myself, just because I always loved acoustic music, playing acoustic guitar, and just stripping out the song.
Yeah.
And the sound like, well, just the guitar and a voice. I always loved that, and was one of the reasons to start as a troubadour.
Yeah, I think it also has something to do with the personality of the musician. I grew up listening to all different kinds of music, but sometimes I really like to listen to guys like Neil Young, for example. And
that's the thing.
You listen to these singer-songwriters and these guys who, Bob Dylan, Neil Young, who will sit there just with their guitar, maybe a harmonica, and there's something about the mood that they set that makes it much more introspective and personal and emotional. There's a very different vibe doing that. Band, it's all
just
energy.
Yes, yeah. Just mentioning Neil Young, and I'm getting the goosebumps.
Yeah,
it was one of the reasons, and that's one thing that I've actually learned. Start traveling to Copenhagen and meeting all these musicians. That's one thing that actually really changed my perspective of music.
How's that?
Because I meeting these troubadours and seeing them playing, that turns me into the Neil Young, Bob Dylan a lot. After that Copenhagen period of mine.
Wow.
I remember going to, back then there were so many Jews, not anymore, but I remember going to Old English and listening to some of the musicians, and there was a change for me. Back that year in Copenhagen really changed me as a musician. I would say.
Can you remember what year that was, or?
I remember that was 2006.
2006.
I came in 2006. Yes, first, and I've got this hit from Rich that year actually. So, in the flat, man.
Rich Vargas.
And, Rich Vargas. And back then in a flat, there was like 10 musicians.
It was crazy.
11, it was crazy. In the living room, all of them. And a part of everything else that we were doing that we're not going to mention in the podcast.
Yeah.
We used to jam as well.
Yeah, I think that was some of the best nights is coming home after playing music and then going in the flat and playing music
and playing, because and then you just have to, but that was that vibe going on in the flat.
Yeah, and
I guess that's the vibe that everybody's missing, really.
Yeah, it was definitely, there was the camaraderie of having all your friends, and I could say that it didn't matter where we were living. It was the fact that we were all together, because let's be honest, that flat was a hellhole. It was bad. It was really, really bad.
I don't have pictures, but
you know what?
It was bad.
You remember Socrates?
Yes.
Yeah, the Greek guy, obviously. So he went into the flat on the last day, and he made a video recording, and it's on YouTube. You can actually you can see it. So, do you have any favorite gigs? Out of all the gigs that you've played, any favorite places or types of gigs that you've played? Yes,
I do. Well, in Copenhagen would be, of course, always Old English, because that was the first gig I had when I came to.
Yeah.
And I was having I brought my friend on my second gig. His name was Atanas from Bulgaria. And so we had like 3-4 months playing together. And we would really start to feel like a band, because we would practice a lot, and
6 days a week. So
6 days a week. So in the end, we were like, together. And Old English, and the other one was Fisken. Now Fisken would be my favorite place to. I don't know,
I have
the
to
vibe
say,
there was good.
Old English was also my first Copenhagen experience as well. And it was probably one of the craziest gigs, especially on the weekends.
The weekends was special. Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy, man.
And Fisken was also a little pub that just got rocking on the weekends, and not necessarily just the weekends, even in the weekdays.
And it was
people
so
just
small.
Be there. Yeah. But people would be dancing, and you'd be having to protect your teeth from getting knocked out every 5 seconds by people dancing by your microphone.
Every time I go to Copenhagen, I always go to Fisken, just because I had these great memories from that place.
Yeah, the Newhound in general is a very special place. Did you ever do one of those boat tours around the harbor?
Yes, I did.
Those are great. I would do one once a year if I can, just because I love it so much. Do you have any tips for other musicians who want to go out and travel and play music for a living? Something you learned on the road.
I would say be patient.
Patient
first. Yeah, patient. Just because some guys, especially young guys, want everything to happen so fast. And be patient and be nice to each other. Be nice to each other. Every musician or you meet, just be nice to him. Say hello, because you've seen people that are not. And especially when we talk about that, when you're away from home, you gotta be nice to each other. Yeah, because that helps a lot.
Well, living in that flat, we saw so many different characters coming in and out of that place, and you knew the guys that were not going to last that long. They just didn't have the personality for it.
Yes, exactly. He would just say, when you see it, you knew they would not last.
Yeah, the guy would come in, and you would say, "Oh, this guy's an a-hole," and he would immediately alienate himself from everyone else. And
yes, so yeah, be nice, be patient, and of course, everything else. You have to know to play guitar. But as I remember, you remember Mick?
Yeah, of course.
You remember. Yeah, and then he would say, "You just be on time for the gig, be on the stage, and the singing is just an extra. If you can sing, that's an extra. Just be on the stage, be on time."
It's about entertaining. You got to be able to play the right music, the right repertoire, and know how to speak to an audience. And
definitely.
Yeah. But I'm thinking about how you were saying you have to be nice to people, and I like to believe in karma. I like to believe that you can, what you put out in the world comes back to you, and I know that I've seen it happen to me a few times playing the gigs, that if I met a musician and we hit it off really well, one in particular I remember, I went out of my way to get her a gig in Switzerland, and I introduced her to this gig, and years later she paid me back by giving me a gig in Norway.
That's great.
Similar thing with a guy who was from Australia, and we became really good friends, and he decided to become an agent one day, and he invited me off to Brisbane and Sydney, and I was 2 months in Australia because of the connection I met there. He also introduced me to Greece as well. So, I mean, this is where you really make these life-changing connections, and if you run around acting like a butthole while you're in the, hanging around, they're not going to be inviting you to these fun things. So
exactly, yeah. So that's one thing, and
that's cool.
Who was that Australian guy? You got me curious now.
Actually,
is that Bob? Is that Bob?
No, he's from Tasmania, believe it or not. But no, I'm talking about Michael Thomas, and he's actually going to be in another episode. I'm going to interview him.
I'm going to wait for all these episodes. It's a really nice idea. Jason.
Thanks. Well, you know what? I'm on lockdown, and I needed something to do.
Yeah,
because
that's a good way to do it.
Yeah. I don't know if I've told you this, but I'm working in a completely different field these days. I have a day job, a boring day job, working in IT.
No, I know. I remember.
Yeah.
I met you last year, so I think
that's right. We talked about it then. Yeah. Although it's good money, I'm missing out on all the things that I really love about being creative.
I saw you in Old Irish last year as well. You were on fire, man.
Thanks,
I
man.
saw one night. Yeah, I think with the other guitar
You came
player.
with Rich, right?
Yeah, yes. And you were on fire, man. You were
Thank you.
really, really good. Yeah, it's great. It was a great gig. I remember that.
Well, what about gear? Now, I mean, this is a completely different subject, but
of course,
is there any piece of gear that you like to bring with you on the road that you said, this is really useful for me, that you would recommend other musicians to bring? Or what do you use? Obviously, you have your guitar and your microphone. Anything else?
Yes. Well, nowadays I use a lot loop
stations.
Loop stations I use a lot, and we've learned it back when we started in Copenhagen.
Yeah.
Back then it was not so
popular,
popular, but I remember we were sitting in a flat and just trying to get the right beat and everything. But the looper nowadays for me, it's really, really important.
Really? See, I couldn't personally make it work, and as a matter of fact, in the last interview I had, we were talking about that, and for some people it works, and others it doesn't.
Yeah, just as long as you not overdo it.
Yeah, and I think you have to have good timing with your feet to make it work.
It made me crazy. Believe me, in the first 4 months I was just wanted to throw it in a.
Yeah, you can't
you
just
have time.
You can't just go and buy a loop station and then bring it to your gig the same night.
No.
It doesn't work. You actually have to sit home and practice with it.
That's a good advice. Don't buy a looper and go straight to the gig. Just don't do it.
Yeah,
you'll be fired.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's some of those gigs are a little bit more free, where you can experiment and play around on quiet nights, but then there's other places that you play, and if you're not banging out all those hits consistently, and let's be honest, you're playing for the bar staff a lot of times, and if the bar staff isn't happy, then
that's the thing. That's actually a very, very good advice. You have to not be only careful with the audience, but with the bar staff. You always have to have it in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, I always go with this mindset.
Yeah, and I would even argue that they're a little bit more important than the audience, because they're
it could be
the bosses. They get the feedback from the bar staff, and there have been nights when I've played and I thought I was doing great, and people were tipping me, and the audience was very appreciative, but there was somebody in the bar that maybe they were having a bad night. They decided to write something that they didn't like, and then suddenly my agent is calling me back and going, what happened over here? And so I don't know. I thought I was doing great. So you definitely have to keep them happy for sure in this line of work. But
so that's the other tough part of being a troubadour, because you have to every night. You have to make it work. You have to be 100% almost every night.
Yeah.
That's right. The thing. You cannot.
And because you're a human being, and especially as you get older, and it gets harder and harder for you to recover after each gig, especially if you like to drink and so on. It can be tough to do 6 nights a week.
That's tough.
One last thing, without going too crazy, do you have any funny stories that you can share about being on the road? Anything that you think people will find amusing?
Well, I would say this, and I'm going to mention a colleague of ours who he passed away last month, Andrew Rhodes.
Oh, yeah. Very sad.
He was a very funny guy. I just want to talk about funny things about him. He was a great guy, and he always make fun, So I remember he was playing, what was that place next to Fisken I just don't remember. New Haven.
McJoy's. There's McJoy's, there's Baroque, there's Fisken, there's Newhound 17. Baroque.
That was Baroque.
Yeah.
And I was in the city. I was playing maybe Fisken. And the first night, Andrew Rhodes goes into Baroque, orders a beer, takes the beer to the microphone, drinks it, and says, the beer here sucks, to the audience. he got fired on the same night. But that's Andrew Rhodes, man. You know, God bless him. I love him.
He was one of the only people I knew that could punctuate a sentence with a fart. And he had like perfect timing with it too. I think he did it deliberately.
And I just, God bless him.
No, he was great.
But that was really funny. Oh, the beer here, really bad. And then,
I was just talking to Michael Thomas, the troubadour from Australia, and he says, Andrew Rhodes, that would have been a podcast interview right there. Yeah. It really would have.
Oh, yeah. He was so funny. He's a so intelligent guy. He was very wise. And
yeah, absolutely.
He would act a little, out of the place, but he was a very, very, very nice guy. And also very good musician.
Wit. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Like this English sense of humor.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Man.
Self-irony. He had this self-irony that English man would have. So I remember him like this.
Well, that about wraps it up for today's podcast. I want to thank once again our guest, Petko Slavov, for coming on to share his story with us.
Thank you.
If you like what you heard and you want to learn more, please go to Amazon and pick up a copy of Troubadour, A Musician's Guide to Touring Europe as a Cover Artist. We're going to take you out with Petko's latest single, In My Head, by his band Airbag. Thanks again, and see you next time.
It was a pleasure.